Welcome to Tech Society, a podcast about all the facets of technology and society. We deliver in-depth analysis from a technological perspective, giving you our take on things and interviewing people that are doing important things. Now, here's your hosts, Alex Dunmo and John Newen.
And before we begin this episode, if you think tech can solve a problem for you, go and check out njs.dev. Ninja Software has Perth's top locally and homegrown software engineering and design talent, focusing on bespoke software for your vision.
Hey techies, today we're talking with Greg Barnes, or Barnesy. Greg was the head coach of the America's Cup and World Championship yachting team, who were the first successful Cup challengers, ending a 132-year tenure by the New York Yacht Club. Greg is now a world-leading corporate coach and master facilitator, and in today's episode, he shares with us some crazy stories from his past and teaches us the following: the 3 A's of successful people, and also his strategies for dealing with cultural differences coaching people from around the world, and his experience with the infamous Alan Bond. Alright, let's get into it.
Thanks, guys. Thanks, Alex and John, for inviting me along. As you know, my name's Greg Barnes. I was born in Brisbane, in Queensland, so I'm a banana bender. So don't ask me any questions about the state of origin, because I won't answer them. But hopefully we'll do well at Suncorp next week. So I left Brisbane when I was 10. My dad took me, my mum, 3 brothers and a sister to Hong Kong, where I grew up since I was 10. Came here to Western Australia to go to the University of WA to do sports science, phys ed at that time. Stayed, did my sports science masters, did my research here. I was lucky enough to get involved in the America's Cup, so I coached America's Cup for a number of years, including the World Championships here where we won the gold medal, and got the experience of losing the America's Cup as well. So as I sometimes do keynotes called From an Eagle to a Feather Duster, because the story, like in 1983, we made history. First team ever to beat the Americans in the America's Cup, 132 years. It was the longest winning streak in sporting history. Wow. And then in 1984, we were voted as the greatest Australian sporting team in history. Which is, as Madeline said, was a bit embarrassing because we beat Don Bradman's Invincibles cricket team and Alan Jones's Grand Slam Wallabies for that award. In 86, we win the gold medal at the World Championships off here in Fremantle. And then in 1987, we didn't even make the finals. So it was a great lesson in leadership and in people in high-performance teams, how you can go from an eagle to a feather duster. So after that experience, I set up my first company in Australia called Australian Management Group. So I now have that and Click Colours, and so been doing coaching, performance, leadership, all that stuff ever since.
So what made you want to go from sport to corporate?
Well, it was after I'd actually done a little bit of corporate in Hong Kong. In between America's Cup campaign, I'd gone up to Hong Kong and set up my first company called Executive Health International in Hong Kong, which was going to be an elite health studio, disco, gym, smoking room, cigar room, cognac room for the rich Chinese in Hong Kong, and on the top, pool deck and everything. And then China announced it was taking back Hong Kong officially from the British in 1997. So all the money disappeared, my backers disappeared, came back penniless to Perth. So the old, most people who have been in business, as you guys know, sometimes if you haven't been broke, you don't know, you haven't learned. And so that's what I did after the America's Cup. Then I thought, well, I've got a business background. And so I sat down and thought, what do I want to do? I don't want to go to the Institute of Sport, where other friends of mine, sports science folks had gone. Didn't like Canberra, too cold, and I thought I'd done everything I needed to do in the sporting field, sports medicine side. And as I was thinking, what do I want to do? I got a call from National Mutual in those days, and then Westpac, and they said, can you come and coach our leadership teams? One, Westpac strategic planning, National Mutual was just in teamwork, executive teamwork. Started doing that and loved it, so I kept going.
What was that first jump like where you went from coaching a sporting team to an executive team?
Oh, it's a natural progression. I mean, you've got the same basic. You're dealing with people. My passion's people. So people, human behaviour, And one of the great things, I've been very lucky in my life. I've experienced a lot of stuff. And so dealing with people, if you've got a high-performance executive team, it's the same as like a couple of weeks ago, I had a group of primary school principals, right?
Yeah.
It's the same principle, right? Or even when I work with school kids, you're dealing with people. And so you've got the same principles around behaviour, around how their mind works, how they gel as a team or not gel as a team, as it may be. And then you just design the processes around that and then just facilitate it.
Who's easier to coach, deckhands or CEOs?
Oh, well, it depends who you're talking about. It depends which ones. Probably CEOs.
Really?
Yeah, probably CEOs simply because they're it's funny to say this, but they're actually under less pressure.
No,
that's crazy.
That's definitely can't be true.
Well, you think of it in an America's Cup campaign. We start about 3 years before the event, and we start with about 400 to 500 applicants that know that there's only going to be 11 at the end.
Yeah.
So it's sort of like The Biggest Loser or Celebrity Apprentice, whatever, over a 3 year period.
That's true. Yeah.
And so you think if you're one of the people that wants to be on that 11 on that final boat crew, you're competing against 300 other people. Right?
Wow.
And you're going through intense training periods, all that sort of stuff. You're being judged, or not judged, but evaluated all the time. Whereas as a CEO, you get time off. and they're working 7 days a week as well, to do that. So they've got to not just do their best individually, but they've got to prove that they can be part of the team.
What's the number one takeaway you got about leadership from coaching the America's Cup team?
Number one takeaway is probably when you're selecting people, you've got the 3 key A's. The first thing you look at for a great team, if you're a leader, is the attitude of the people. So do they have particularly an interdependent attitude? Like, are they aware of what they do, how it affects other people? Are they aware of the fact that they're not the center of the universe, they're actually part of a team? Are they aware that they need to share? All the usual stuff we say should be common sense, but in an executive setting, it doesn't happen. The second A is their ability to learn. So, like, does this person have the ability to learn? What I'd like them to learn over time. Are they keen on the uptake, etc.? And the third A is their actual ability to do the job, which sort of is funny because a lot of execs flip it over and they look at the first A and then sometimes they never look at the other A's. So that was probably one of the key lessons. The other part of that is also, as a leader, understanding how flexible you've got to be. You can't just be one style of leader. You've got to think about who individually and group-wise, who am I leading? Who are these people? Some people will react to a lot of empowerment. Other people like a lot of direction. Right? Some people don't mind delegating. And an example I use, if I said to you, hey, John and Alex, I'm going to empower you. I'm going to let you go out and play the US Masters, right? I'm going to send you over to the US. You can play the US Masters. And I think, that's great. I'm empowering you. I'm letting you do it. And you're thinking, oh, no, I can't play golf. I'm going to be on TV in front of billions of people. I don't want to do that. So that was a great lesson in leadership too, is, think about who you're leading individually and team.
What was your most memorable assignment since you founded AMG?
I was talking to somebody the other day, a friend of mine who's in Perth at the moment from overseas, and most memorable was actually Kazakhstan. So I was designing and facilitating the scenario planning for Kazakhstan, which companies don't do enough these days. So in scenario planning, you're basically interviewing people going in, and then you're designing 3 key scenarios. Ouch scenario, where the future goes up and down as it always does, and at the end, it's compared to our strategic plan, it's ouch, how did that happen? Big shock. The yippee scenario goes on and comes out great, and then the steady Eddie is, yep, things pretty much happen as per our strategic plan. Now, if you think back, the first thing we do is emphasize with people that all scenarios are, demystify it, all they simply are is a plausible yet surprising story about the future. So, for example, in a scenario, we'd throw in a wild card like a pandemic, like we've just had, right? And they'd say, well, that'll never happen. You say, yeah, but what if it did? How would it affect your strategic plan? What would you do about it? What if there was suddenly some of your oil rigs, like you had a disaster or whatever? How would that affect your strategic plan? And so then it goes up and down. And why Kazakhstan was fascinating was because after one of the ouch scenario had a scenario where on the Chinese border, where the Kazakh capital was at that time up in the mountains, if they came across to secure the oil pipeline that runs between China and Kazakhstan, then they would capture the capital within a day because it's next to the border. So Kazakhstan actually moved its capital. So the capital of Kazakhstan now is like a Canberra. They've moved it thousands of kilometres away from the border. Yeah. They've made an artificial capital just in case that ever happened.
Wow.
So that was memorable. Plus the head of Kazmunagas there was an ex-colonel of the KGB, so he was great fun to work with.
What was that like?
Oh, he was great. I'll never forget him because as you interview folks going in, you're talking about, okay, we're going to do scenarios. What are your issues considered? You've got pages and pages of notes from all the other stakeholders, government, the other oil companies, etc. In his case, he was just going, the whole thing. Yeah. So this is going to be a hard case. So I thought, I know these personalities, so I gave him a pack of our coloured cards we use to get people to self-evaluate.
So that's click colour, right?
Click colour, yeah.
When we first met you gave us the pack of cards.
Yeah, that's right.
And challenged us to ask our wives what colours we were.
Yeah. Well, in his case, see, I thought, I know he's a high blue, right? So I gave him
what's a high blue?
High blue is a logical analytical, right?
Okay.
Very, always questioning, always, quite judgmental in their thought process. You'll always recognise a high blue because it feels like you're playing chess with them in your mind. They'll ask you questions. Prove that. What's the model? And they're doing an intellectual game with you all the time.
Yeah.
So in his case, I thought, yeah. So I gave him the pack of cards, and I just said to him, look, tomorrow when we start the 5-day scenario planning, this is one thing we'll do at the beginning just so people can get to know each other, as an icebreaker type thing. He said, no. So he comes into the session. First thing that amused me was he walked in with 2 interpreters this time instead of the one.
And is that because he didn't trust one of the
interpreters? No, it's because later I said to him, why did you bring 2 into the session when I got to know him better? And he said, because Barnesy, you speak so much. I thought I'd give them a rest. But anyway, they all went to what we do is say, pre-select your colour corner, and then you've got to say, well, why did I pick, say, the green corner? So like post-pandemic, I had a group from Rio Tinto the other day, and one of the ladies said, I picked the green corner because during this pandemic, I've spent the whole time turning around the labels in my pantry. Right? And then I had another, one of the guys in the Rio group, he said, and I picked the yellow corner because I kept forgetting my mask and didn't understand what regulations are all of the day. The red corner, a couple of them said, we picked this because we're very empathetic, so we spent the whole time worrying about how people were going and people getting sick and that. And a couple of people in the blue corner, they said, well, we picked the blue corner because we're analysing all the vaccines and the RNA and all that sort of stuff. So he went to the blue corner. And of course, all the other stakeholders, this is high pressure, right? Like this is the whole country, serious.
Yeah.
And they're thinking, we thought this was going to be really serious stuff. This looks like just a bit of fun and games. How's he going to react? Because if he's not on side, no way we're going to get any agreement going forward. And so he goes to blue corner. So I go to him as a facilitator and say, so explain to me, why did you pick the blue corner? And he goes, right. And everyone goes, oh no, this is going to be a disaster. Because the interpretation comes through, I am not blue, no. And so I said, don't panic. As a facilitator, we always coach, don't panic, just smell the group and sense what's happening. So I just calmly said back to him, so how would you describe yourself? And it came back, right? Interpretation came back, I'm not blue, I'm dark blue. And everyone in the room just cracked up.
So edgy.
Yeah. And then just quickly to finish that the other memorable thing about that was the dinner that night. He got appointed by the group as the KGB person to fine people for not turning up or for being late or whatever, or saying or not being open enough, whatever. And we have a carer to give positive feedback. And the dinner that night, he said, Barnesy, I'm really enjoying this. This is the best thing I've ever done. I said, why? Did you like the process? And everything? He said, no. He said, because I got appointed KGB. And I said, so? He said, I used to be KGB. He was an ex-colonel KGB. He even took me to his old headquarters in Atterau to show me the building.
Oh, wow.
So that was, I'll never forget that.
How do you get a job in Kazakhstan like that? Like, how does that even come to be?
Well, again, I'm very, very lucky because one of the I became an international partner with ODI, who are based out of Boston. Okay. And at the time, they were in the top 3 consulting firms in the world in an area called quality management. And they're mainly in the leadership side of it and the people side of it. Like my silent partner at the time used to advise President Bush at the time on the Boardrooms Awards in America. Professor John Martin, absolutely amazing. In fact, he's a success story behind Argyle Diamonds, but that's another story. So through that, I got introduced to companies like McDonald's, Chevron, ExxonMobil, all these people, executives. And so Tengiz Chevoil is a joint venture between the Kazakhstan government, Chevron, other oil companies. So the head of Chevron at the time said, "Hey, Barnsey, can you come to Kazakhstan and run scenarios for us?" Because I'd done their ones in Philippines as well. So they said, "Can you do the same thing here?" And so, really lucky that people, and then a couple of leaders, as you know yourselves, if you do a good job, you get invited back.
Yeah.
And so a couple of the leaders, got to know me quite well, and they'd moved to a different country or whatever. Like, one of my favourite guys, he's retired now, Kelly Tarika. When he became head of China, he rang me up one day and he said, "Barnsey, I need you up here in Beijing." I said, "Why, Kelly?" He said, "You won't believe it. They all wear suits." And he was actually Pacific Man of the Year. He's part Fijian, part Papua New Guinean. And he used to love, he's a red-yellow, and term means really right brain, bit out there, like some of your software guys, really geniuses, right?
Yeah.
But very creative, but poor at detail. So he'd say, "Come up, we need to do a Mambo night. Bring Mambo shirts. I want them all in Mambo shirts, and then we want to do the colours." And his logic was, and this is important for leaders. All leaders will relate to this. It takes you a long time normally to get to know who are these people really.
Yeah.
Because they're being on guard. You're being a little bit careful too. They're judging, what sort of leader is this person? I better not. Can I be frivolous? Can I not be frivolous? So in his case, he said, "Look, instead of me spending 8 months trying to work out who these people are, and probably more importantly, them working out who I am as a leader, if we do a colours session in Mambo shirts, they know, number one, they don't have to take me seriously. They can actually relax and chill out with me. Number two, they'll understand that I'm very creative, quite right brain, and I'm not always good on detail. So some of my language, some of the things I might say, they're like, what's that about? And number three, they might realise that they can self-manage me and say, hey, Kelly, before you go running off, right, doing another big gas project, we haven't finished the last one, right? Oh, yeah, sorry, I better slow down.
How does that fit with Chinese business culture, though? That's,
I was going to ask.
Wow.
Because, you
Yeah.
have a background being in Hong Kong.
Yeah.
And then mainland China is getting bigger and bigger.
Yeah.
Does that have any impact on your work with mainland China?
Well, the biggest difference is the way you design and facilitate stuff, if it was primarily a Chinese audience, is very different to, say, in Australia, and it's different again in America. Okay, so like in Australia, we can have a lot more jokes, it's a lot freer, you can do group work really quickly.
You can swear.
Yeah, you don't. I never swear. No,
you can.
You could if you wanted to, but it's just. I grew up in a family where we never swore because there's no need for it. And Dad would always say, "Well, if you can't say something without swearing, then don't say it." even with jokes and it, why do it anyway? So in Australia, that's very relaxed. You can make, like we've just done, generalisations about people saying, "Oh, they're yellow, they're blue," and that, and have a bit of a laugh because people don't take it too seriously. In America, you've got to be a lot more careful about that because of the political correctness and that, and the conservatives. As you know, Americans are very conservative.
Yeah.
So you've got to ease into that. And then in places like Asia, especially Chinese culture, as you asked, John, I'd never, ever get them straight into group work. It's always, firstly, individually doing stuff, so they're building confidence. And then the next piece, say, for example, if they wanted to share coloured cards, whatever, to be with the person next to them or somebody they know well. So they're still in a comfort zone, and so they're not losing face, right? And then eventually, sometimes it might only be the second day where they'll start opening up, and then they start having fun because they're still just people.
What about, you said you worked in the Philippines. What about Philippines? That's kind of like it's a very different culture, isn't it? Yeah,
Philippines they're actually pretty good. They're pretty relaxed. Like my brother, the director of the casinos in Macau, his son runs the Ascot in Makati in Manila.
Oh wow!
And he says the same about his staff. He loves working with them because there's in an Asian culture they're closer to Australian type culture. They're quite open to things and they're quite relaxed about things, less conservative, less worried about losing face or whatever. So that's quite easy. I mean, the only hard bit about Philippines is Tagalog is like impossible to learn. It is like the hardest language apart from maybe, I don't know, Cambodian to learn.
I didn't know that.
It is Tagalog and Cambodian. Because everywhere we do conferences or do do assignments, I try to learn a little bit about the local language, so at least I can say hello and good morning, stuff like that.
You used to have an interpreter with you, I imagine.
Sometimes, yeah. Sometimes I did one in Bangkok for about 600 people for Essilor. It was actually organised by a friend of mine who's in town at the moment, Leanne Christie, who runs Ovations International, international brokerage. And Leanne got me the job, and it was like 700, 800 people in Bangkok, and it was 4 interpreters like the UN at the back interpreting it. And that was really hard. You know, they all had their headphones on, and there was an interpretation in Mandarin, in Korean, English, obviously, and German, I think was the other.
Oh, wow.
So it was really, so you had to wait, like you'd tell a joke or you'd say something, and it'd take longer in different languages. And it was hilarious, actually, because you'd look at the audience, you'd see the Koreans laughed at that one, but the Chinese didn't. Well, use that one again.
And the Germans just laughed.
And the Germans just, what's this all about?
Yeah, it seems like a lot of cultures can be a lot more serious than the Australians.
Yeah.
Like, is it hard for in international business? Is it hard for other countries to take Australians seriously,
or for us to take them seriously?
Yeah, because we're so laid back, right? But they're a lot more serious in other countries.
That's a really good point, because that's one of the things I struggle with. I've got to consciously think about who the audience is.
Yeah.
So, like I said earlier, you've got to smell the group. Who have I got here? Like you can have. I've had groups that work with McDonald's in China who have been great fun. All they want to do is play, right? And then you'll have other groups in China who will be very, very conservative, and you've got to go really, like I said before, it might be the second day before you're even doing group exercise and that. And that's, I think, one of the things we forget is, really thinking about how unique people are. And so whether they're Chinese or American or whatever, they can be quite different. So don't just assume that. But it is a good lesson how you get taken seriously. As you know, in Asia in particular, it's relationships. Yeah. So, you just be gentle with it. You also understand in major assignments that you might be sitting down like with 2 people here at the table like we are, and there's a third chair that's empty. And when somebody arrives at that third chair, then you're speaking to the boss. You're speaking to the decision maker, because they've just been sussing you out for a few meetings to work out, do we take them seriously? Do we want to even talk real business? And you might have heads of agreement, all sorts of stuff. But until that empty chair gets filled by the person who makes a decision, you've just been talking to some of his team who are reporting back to him or her and saying, nah, or yes, we need to do business with these people.
Wow. Was your time in Hong Kong, did that help you inform you on how to deal with this kind of stuff?
Oh, we had nearly 90 nationalities at my school, King George V School in Hong Kong. So, my best mates were Indian, Chinese, New Zealanders, et cetera, et cetera. And so it was a fantastic upbringing for anyone, because you got a sense of the world is global.
Yeah.
And you also got a sense of, some of my Chinese mates were bigger rat bags than my Australian Kiwi mates, right? So you also got a sense of, don't just assume that somebody is like that just because of where they come from. Think about the different cultures. My Indian mate, he was great fun, because I used to love going to his place because you could eat with your hands. Because his dad was an Air India pilot. So
and you comfortable with that?
Yeah, I love it. Yeah,
wow.
I love eating curry and papadums, everything with your fingers. Yeah. You just got to remember which hand to use.
Not the left one, right?
Yeah, that's right.
Okay.
The other facet, I remember the other day I was talking to another group of people about cultures and that, was the thing in Bangladesh. I was doing a leadership session. That was probably my second best assignment. Was we actually got assigned to help Chevron merge with Unocal when they did that major merger, and the merger was the leaders getting together in every country and talking about how do we optimize this. And they don't do it enough. And so instead of just how we're going to merge and all that detail can be worked out by everyone else, the main focus of the discussions were how do we bring 2 companies together and end up with one that's even better than where we are. So what are your strengths, limitations, opportunities, threats? What are ours? Let's be very open about it. What can we learn off each other? And even though one might be like in Thailand, Chevron was actually smaller than Unocal. Right. But in other countries, Chevron was the gorilla taking over the chimpanzee type thing with Unocal. And so people going into it had preconceived ideas of, well, we're Chevron, we're 60,000 people. What have we got to learn from you? Mm-hmm. Whereas in Thailand, one of the things they learned was some critical stuff about offshore drilling that they've now implemented. And the guy that was head of drilling for Unocal in Thailand is now the global drilling person for Chevron.
Wow.
Because he had that expertise. And so they were smart enough to say, hey, we don't care where it comes from. If that's a great idea, let's adopt it.
So I take it you're a big fan of SWOT then?
Yeah, but I don't term it SWOT. We term it SLOT, strengths, limitations, opportunities, and threats.
So rather than weaknesses.
Well, and because it's subtly, and this is where I'm very lucky because of my sports science and America's Cup coaching background. Because you've got to realise I lived with the crew, right? So I lived day in, day out with them, 7 days a week, 18 hours a day with people. So you learn a lot about people. And one of the things you learn is, if you say to, the example I use, if you're coaching a tennis player, Rafael Nadal, who's just pulled out of Wimbledon or whatever, but if you said to him as a young kid, say, listen, Rafael, you've got a weakness on your backhand side. Guess what? He will always have a weakness on his backhand side. But if you said to the same tennis player, as a young tennis player, I've noticed there's a bit of a limitation on your backhand. And if you think about it psychologically, the first thing they think of is, it's limitation. Wonder how I overcome that limitation. Right? And there's subtle things like that. And so that's why we use L instead of the W in that slot rather than SWOT.
Interesting. Huh.
And we even color code it too. So like opportunities is a yellow corner, crazy ideas, threats is a blue corner, the risk, all that stuff as well. So.
Just give us a quick rundown of Click Color and the colors system.
Okay. So really quickly, Click Colors came from my first book, The Genie Within, which I wrote to my boy, who's now 24, but he was 3 at the time. Yeah. So I'd previously been diagnosed with multiple sclerosis, which is why I'm on the fundraising committee. But I was very lucky. I've just got a single demyelination down my left side. But then my little boy, Callum, who's a bit of a rat bag, I yelled at him one day, collapsed on the floor, ended up back in for MRIs. They thought it was the MS presenting. They discovered it wasn't. It was actually, I'd had a stroke on my left-hand side. My left internal carotid artery had split open.
Wow.
So I suddenly realised, like some people do, I might not live long enough to see him grow up.
Yeah.
My father, who's now 97, still living up in Hong Kong, always talked about speaking to the genie. Talk to the genie about what you want to achieve in life and then go and plan to do it. So I thought I need to put down all that stuff, stuff I'd done in Kazakhstan, all that stuff I talked about earlier. And part of that, after those stories, I wanted Callum to think, okay, so how do I do unusual things like these people? And the second part of, after you do your mind map, is evaluate yourself. So who am I and how do I understand different people? And so that's where the red, green, yellow, blue, whole brain stuff came up. And then a mate of mine, Dave Katsoukas, who's written about 15 books, he said, hey, Barnsey, can we do just a book on the colours? So we developed Click Colours. Yeah. So we did the book just on that. And so now, around the world, everything from school students through to boards, we use that as a quick, simple way. It's not a psychometric. They don't have to fill in. We do Myers-Briggs and Harris and all that sort of stuff as well, and that. But they don't have to fill in forms. They can just explore it like we were talking about earlier.
It's a very high level.
Yeah, well, like that KGB guy, right? He can simply say, I'm not blue, I'm high blue, right? But you get him to fill in a psychometric and he'd probably say, no, I'm not doing that rubbish, right?
Yeah.
I'm not telling you, I'm not letting you send this to some psychologist to tell me who I am. I'll tell you who I am. Right? And so, and that's been a great experience. It's been fantastic fun. The impact you can have on, with teachers, for example, them understanding other teachers, students, parents even. Yeah. And the children that they work with, that can be really mind-opening. Had a group from the Indigenous culture last week, and for them, thinking about the people that they work with and why they behave in different ways has been fantastic. So Click Colours, and now it goes around the world. Disney use it as the front end of their leadership programs now through people who basically we just support. So we supply the products, train facilitators, and help them with it. And most of the stuff is delivered by other people. Priority Management, for example, use it globally as a front end of a lot of their programs. So they just produce it out of Canada and they just pay us royalties. So even as we're sitting here today, I don't know how many people are using it anywhere in the world or what's happening, but you hear stories.
Yeah, that's brilliant. Yeah. All right. Our final question. We ask everyone this question. So it's a whimsical question.
Yeah.
Obviously, you're familiar with boxing and fighting, and the fighters have their intro song, right? So lights go down, fog machine starts, and their song starts that
to come
embodies their if it's wrestling, embodies their character.
Yep.
What is your intro song?
Oh, that's easy. Land Down Under.
Nice. Good answer.
That's dead easy.
That's so quick.
In fact, one of the great shames of our '87 defence here was, in all their wisdom, the marketing gurus decided to change our war song from what we had at Newport, because every time we take the boat out, right, Black Swan would tow out, Australia Tour, whichever yacht it was, we'd have huge speakers on the back.
Yeah.
Singing out to the Americans, "We come from a land down under, we're men thunder." We'd all be here, and it just scared the hell out of them. And then the marketing guys came. I can't even remember what the song was now that they changed it to. But it was big. It was actually interesting when no one actually talked to the crew about it, because every single one of us would said, "Don't be crazy. We know how this psychs out the other crews and how it builds up us. Like boxers, wrestlers coming into the ring.
Yeah.
We're going to war." Right, we're basically going to war with them. And so to have Land Down Under blaring out was perfect.
Thank you so much, Bonzi.
Thank you.
Absolute
Thanks
pleasure.
for the invitation.
Yeah.
Thanks, Alex, John, absolute pleasure from my side too. Thank you.
You've made it to the end of another episode of Tech Society. Well, that was a great episode. I hope you enjoyed that as much as we enjoyed making it. Make sure you hit us up on Twitter @Tech Society, head over to the website, subscribe to the newsletter. And on this month in tech history, August 24, 1995, kicking off one of the largest product launches in tech history, Microsoft releases the highly anticipated Windows 95. More than 1 million copies will be sold in the first 4 days of its release.